are the talk of the town currently, and so we're going to break down some of those issues as well as talk about steps that Taxify has taken in progressing further this year. Welcome, Shivachi.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Malika.
All right, thank you for joining us. Now, well, launched in April, we saw Taxify Go. Right? We've seen that it's more budget-friendly compared to the regular Taxifys, a smaller four-seater car. You've got relatively smaller engines, I believe 1300cc whereabouts. Yep. And these cars that consume less fuel means that, of course, there are lower operational costs for drivers and cheaper options then for the customers. So what factors were involved behind this particular development?
I mean, first of all, thanks a lot for the question, and thanks a lot for welcoming me to the show.
Sure.
So Taxify has always been committed to providing a very affordable, very convenient way of people to get around. And when we launched in this country 2 years ago, we started off with the slightly bigger cars, the 1500 cc's, the regular cars that you can see on the roads. But over time, we realized that it's possible for us to make the service more affordable without compromising the quality of the service that goes to the client. Mm-hmm. That was on the customer side. Also on the driver side, we realized that the cost of fuel, or the operational cost of any 1500 cc car, fuel, for example, is about 20–25%. So if you're able to drop that even just by 15 or 20%, then the driver is able to take home a lot more money. Okay. So our decision to, have more fuel-efficient vehicles was driven by two things. One is we want people to be able to move around more affordably. At the same time, we want drivers to be able to make a lot more money, even doing the same number of trips every single day.
Okay, so that makes sense on all those fronts. And 7 or so months in now, I believe, what are the lessons learned? Because there have been quite a few incidences relating to taxis in general, where passengers may not feel very safe. They may also feel the sense of apathy sometimes from the drivers, especially when the costs being cut and they're charging them less. They're less inclined to take that trip as opposed to longer trips where they can then gain more money, of course. So what has been some of the steps that you've taken in order to ensure safety of passengers and this lack of apathy when it comes to the drivers treating the customers in that way?
Yeah, so I'll first of all speak about price changes, and then I'll speak about safety. So I mean, every single time we think about adjusting our prices, our goal is always to optimize the price. And the thing we keep telling people is that pricing is a balancing act. So it's not always that higher prices translate to higher earnings. In fact, what we've noticed is the more affordable the service gets, then a lot more people start to use the service.
So greater number of trips.
Great number of trips, yeah. Mm-hmm. So people make a lot more money. So drivers make a lot more money for every single hour they drive with us. So it's not always that higher prices translate to higher earnings. Mm-hmm. What we haven't done very well in the past is a case of communication. So we haven't communicated very well to drivers that look, your earnings are a factor of how many trips you take every single hour, the average trip price. And therefore, even with changes in prices, you should be able to make this much money. You should be able to make 25% more, 20% more. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to work on over the last few months. So now, for example, we have these monthly discussions with drivers. We call drivers in and have a chat with them and explain to them about earnings. And we've seen drivers begin to understand the narrative around pricing changes are always driven by Taxify's commitment to us making more money every single hour. You made the point about safety, and that's a great question. We take safety extremely seriously. We put it at the center of our operations. And just to take you through our entire safety steps is, even before this driver gets on the road, we already know who they are. We have seen their documents. We have verified with the government that these documents are genuine. We have done a background check to ensure that they don't have a criminal history. And then when they, say in the case of borders, for example, we also go ahead and provide them with the right gear. So we give them 2 helmets, we give them 2 reflector jackets, we give them training on first aid, training on customer service, all those things. And even beyond that, we have certain steps or certain processes within our own company just to take care of safety. So for example, we have this SOS button in the driver app. So if a driver gets into a situation that they feel unsafe, or they get into, even if it's a medical emergency, or they get into a place where they feel insecure, mm-hmm. They can always tap the button.
Okay.
And in future, we're going to extend that service also to riders. So there's all these things that we've done around safety, and we continue to do a lot more around safety. Also, we take the step of collaborating with the government. So in a case where things go wrong on a trip and someone has to contact the police, then mm-hmm. we are always willing to share information with the police to ensure that this case is brought to a conclusion. So we've done a couple of things around safety. We continue to build a very safe and sustainable platform. We realize that safety is at the center of the decision why people choose to ride with us.
Okay.
And therefore we'll keep investing a lot more into
Okay,
it.
and I like that you mentioned the border, because I've been seeing Taxify border. I've seen the reflective jackets with the tag, of course. And you ventured into Mombasa with Taxify border as well recently. How successful has it been in Nairobi, and how do you expect it to fare in Mombasa?
You know, Mombasa and Nairobi have a lot of similarities amongst them. Despite the cultural differences, they're still huge cities, more than 1 million people living in there. So every single morning in Mombasa, the average commute is about 35, 40 minutes, which is not very different from Nairobi, because Nairobi it's about 50, 60 minutes. So there's a lot of similarities. So when we see chances like this, our motivation, or Taxify's motivation, has always been to add convenience, add a faster way of people to get around. So that was the thinking behind Mombasa, that we can help people get from one point to the other extremely faster.
All right.
And we've seen a very good adoption of the service.
Fantastic. So before we go ahead, I want to actually cross over to Elfas Lagat, who is going to be talking to us about the Misuki Rules that, of course, have been debated about and have been dominating conversations when it comes to transport. So let's cross over to Elfas and hear more.
Capping speed at 80 kilometers per hour is one of the highlights of the famous Misuki Rules that the late John Misuki gazetted in September 2003. And of course, those were the rules to ensure that matatus are compliant with safety standards, to ensure that road carnages and road accidents are rather contained. And of course, some of the highlights of that Misuki Rules was ensuring that there were safety belts for every single passenger, and also all PSV vehicles carrying just the number that is required of their matatus. Of course, they must also be licensed, and the conductors as well as drivers bearing badges with their pictures featuring prominently. Of course, speed governance is also one of the standout highlights of the Misuki Rules. This is a conversation that has now been gaining national recognition, particularly with the major crackdown on PSV vehicles to ensure that they adhere to safety and traffic regulations. Of course, government officials, we've had NTSA Director General Francis Major, as well as the IG coming out strongly, being very vocal about the need for matatu operators to adhere to the new set of rules, alias Misuki Rules. Of course, now the number of people who have died as a result of being involved in road accidents since the start of the year, according to NTSA officials, data rather, is 2,585 people to this point. Very high number of people there. And of course, this has necessitated the need to really come out strongly and make sure that the rules are adhered to. So to this point, let us just engage Pastor Joseph Mburu, who is the director of one of the motors here in Nakuru, to just talk to us about the reaction so far regarding ensuring rather that the Misuki Rules are adhered to on the roads. Particularly, let's start with you. Do you support the reintroduction, or rather making the Misuki Rules work?
I really support very strongly the resurgence of Misuki Rules. Having been involved from the word go, because from the time we started feeding the speed governors as a nation, we have been so much involved as Seas Motors, and therefore I really support the Misuki Rules.
And of course, with the speed governors being one of the critical components of the Misuki Rules, traffic regulations, if you like, have you received any reactions from drivers, particularly from matatus, seeking to ensure that they are compliant with this provision?
Yes, I've been receiving calls from matatu owners, and even from those people who are operating tour vans, and they are really inquiring about the speed governors and also the safety belts. Yes.
What about the issue of fitting them with, and I would like you to speak to the aspect of, is it a knee-jerk reaction? Is it being reactive? Or what happens again with fitting the speed governors? Then after some time, they are able to disable the speed governors. Do you think this time round is going to be effective?
I think first and foremost, what I would like to say is that the officers enforcing the law, they need to be more serious and more committed about the issue of the speed governors. Because as far as I'm concerned, because we also renew the certificates on an annual basis, is that people no longer even renew the certificates. So I wonder how they get the inspection stickers without coming for the certificate for the speed governors. So to me, I would think there is a failure on the area of officers, and they used to pull up their socks on that. Yes.
Maybe your final thoughts on ensuring that road accidents, particularly in this region of Nakuru, of course, you understand Gilgil and Salga are hotspot areas that particularly are really of great concern. What moving forward should be done to ensure that at least safety standards on these roads are improved alongside the Misuki Rules?
I think the issue of the speed governor is very key to reducing the accident along our highways, not only in Nakuru, but all over the nation. But there is one challenge which we are facing right now as far as speed governors and safety belts is concerned, because the dealers have no longer been stocking these gadgets, and therefore it's like a wake-up call. So even those people who've been calling, they're just calling to inquire because the speed governors and the safety belts are out of stock.
Thank you so much. Joseph Mburu just speaking to us regarding the reintroduction of Misuki Rules. Of course, to this point, 15% of PSVs and between 25 and 35% of drivers and conductors are not licensed to operate on the roads. Of course, with the reintroduction of the Misuki Rules and, of course, a major pronouncement tomorrow, in the words of the Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boynet, it remains to be seen whether this is going to be a lasting solution this time round, or whether it is going to be a knee-jerk reaction that many critics are pointing out to be. But now that is a conversation that would happen once the government sets out the ball rolling to ensure that PSV are adherent to the traffic regulation standards as Misuki Rules. Back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Elfas Lagat. They're talking about the Misuki Rules and, of course, the possible implementation once again of these on the roads of Kenya. Actually, you know, it's quite a worrying statistic that 2,585 people already this year have lost their lives due to road accidents. And coming back to you, Shivachi, about the safety of Taxify and when it comes to curbing such incidents. Well, actually, when it comes to taxis, according to these rules, they have to all be painted with the constant yellow band. It should be 15 centimeters. It should be visible from 275 meters away. And how do you think that the company is going to take on board if the Misuki Rules do come back into effect?
Okay. So first of all, I think it's very good to see the government put a lot more force into driving more safety around our roads. Just a statistic you've mentioned, about 2,500 people have lost their lives. That's extremely sad. Now, coming back to how that is going to impact the business, one principle that Taxify operates under is always to run towards regulation and not away from regulation. So when we see the government come up with laws like this, we know that at the core of the motivation of these laws is just to make the roads much safer. And therefore, what that means for us is we definitely have to make our drivers comply with the laws. We see the sense behind these laws. Things like having the band that's just for, to make it more conspicuous, having the driver photo inside the car, that's just to, sort of like, this driver is inside this car and it's easy to identify who's driving the car, for example. So there's a lot of logic, a lot of sense behind that motivates a lot of these laws. And therefore, for us is to have our drivers comply with the laws. If there's any way we can help our drivers comply with the law faster or maybe make it cheaper for them to comply with the law, then those we will explore.
Okay, thank you so much for your insights on that. Now, let's move away from Kenya a little bit because you expanded your operations in Tanzania, you've opened up in Dodoma. And what influenced that particular decision instead of, perhaps Dar es Salaam or any other place? Why Dodoma?
Yeah, Dodoma and Mwanza have a lot of potential, actually. I visited them late last year and I was surprised by first of all, the size of the city, how fast it's growing, how difficult it was for people to move around when I was there, and also the population of the cities themselves. It's quite massive. So from our perspective, Dodoma and Mwanza have gotten to the place where they're those cities that need ride-hailing. So we think of, the way we move into cities, we think of cities that require us to go into those cities. They need a lot more convenient, more affordable ways to move around. Those are the things that drive our decision around moving into those cities. So if you think about Dodoma and Mwanza, for example, and the services we've launched there, the level of adoption that we've seen on the driver side, on the customer side, it's been very promising. And we will keep being on the lookout for cities that get to the position where they require ride-hailing to come and improve the way people get around those cities.
Okay, fantastic. Now, when we talk about, of course, you expanding to other places, what are some of the challenges you encounter when you do expand to the East African region in general as compared to those that you would find in Kenya in operating your business successfully?
That's a great question. There's a number of challenges that we faced. One of the biggest was, still is, every time we get into a new market, then compliance is a problem. It's a problem because we always meet a huge base of drivers who, one, don't comply with the law, two is perhaps don't have proper licensing, and Taxify just can't operate a service like that. So we have to push all these drivers into a level of compliance. That typically costs some money. It takes a lot of time for us to get these drivers to be compliant. That's typically the biggest problem that we face whenever we move into a new market. But what we've done is build much closer relationships with the government. So for example, in Kisumu or in, say, Nairobi, or even Mombasa, for example, what we do is we make the cost of compliance cheaper. So we would buy licensing in bulk from the government or help drivers pay for that licensing. We'd get them to get trained and get on the road much faster, get insurance much faster. So we've built partnerships with the government that make it very easy for people to become compliant so they start driving for us.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. On that note, I'm going to wrap it up. And much appreciate you taking the time to join us on Business Today.
I appreciate it, Malika.
All right, that was the Taxify General Manager East Africa, Shivachi Muleji, joining us for the show, talking Taxify, Misuki laws, and more. On that note, we're going to take a short commercial break, but we'll be right back.